Coming up here is A.J. LaFaro, the immediate past chairman of Maricopa County Republicans. He is no stranger to telling it like it is, from calling out our governor for doing a midnight backroom deal, to pointing out that ballot harvesting isn't really helping our republic. He is now the chair of ASRA in Arizona, and ASRA is a bottom-up organization with strength and power in local chapters. We endorse conservative Republican candidates for congressional, statewide, legislative, county offices, city council, school boards, local partisans, and nonpartisan seats. ASRA works to research, collect, and publicize economic, social, and moral information to activists. Our primary focus is to recruit and train and activate precinct committeemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. Come on, whenever you're ready. Thank you. Give him a hand.
I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Actually, I have one clarification from Matt. I'm the national director, one of two, for the Arizona Republican Assembly. Okay? I'm not the president, that's Thayer Bashur, who was the executive director for the AZGOP during Tom Morrissey's administration prior to the current Republican Party chair. Okay? So, on that note, one of the things I do, and that position of National Director for ASRA came about after I started this presentation that I've been delivering to hundreds, if not thousands. I think I've spoken to about 2,000 people so far in the last 6 months concerning 2 issues.
Can we cut some of the lights so we can...
Sure, absolutely. You bet. I think they're right here.
Yeah.
That it?
Yeah,
better?
that's much better.
Okay, thank you. All right. So during that 2 years, from 2013 to 2014, it was challenging to say the least, and there were a lot of issues that we had to face, okay? One of those issues was right after I was elected chairman, I was requested to testify at a Senate elections hearing, Arizona Senate hearing on elections concerning ballot harvesting, stuffing, and tampering. That was in January of 2013, okay? So I found that interesting, and we'll fast forward to that here in a few minutes. The things that I want to visit with you tonight about, and I would ask that you keep your questions to the end. We're going to talk about ballot harvesting, stuffing, tampering, closed primaries, and then the Q&A, where I enjoy that because the feedback from the audiences that I'm speaking to. Okay? But before I get started on that, I would ask for your patience here a moment, because this is the issue that many have seen, many have not seen. And I'll set the stage for you on this. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. As the chairman of the Maricopa County Republican Committee, I was the official representative for the Republican Party at county elections during the 2014 elections, both primary and general. Okay? This was the day before the primary, which I think, if I remember correctly, was August 26th. So this was August the 25th. This is during the lunch hour, and I'm sitting there in the foyer at the county elections office, just over here to the right, reading my Wall Street Journal until the county elections people started back up processing the early ballots. Okay? This gentleman comes in, has a box. I estimated as we went through this, it's about an 8-minute video, about 600 ballots that he brought in. The ironic thing here is that in January of 2013, I testified before then Senate Michelle Reagan's Elections Committee about this very thing, okay? And it was an extremely interesting 4-hour meeting, and the senators, the Republican senators on that committee, after they had heard all of the testimony, were convinced that voter fraud was alive and well here in Arizona. okay? We talked about things like this, all right? But by virtue and fortune and luck, I captured this during the August 2014 election. This is 24/7 video surveillance by county elections, okay? The cameras are there, it's public information. I was absolutely amazed, shocked, to say the least, at what this person was doing, okay? During the 2013 legislative session, this actually became illegal, okay? This became illegal. But unfortunately, in 2013, there was an omnibus bill that was passed in the legislature. It was House Bill 2305, which I call a blender bill, that brought all of this great election law together into one bill. That passed, that was approved or signed by the governor, but unfortunately, unions, progressive socialist organizations, groups that thrive on this type of ballot harvesting, stuffing, and tampering, went out, paid for about 150,000 signatures to get an initiative on the ballot that would have been on the ballot in November of 2014 to make HB 2305 illegal. In our 2015 legislative session, in our 2014 legislative session, our legislators, our conservative legislators, did not want 2305 to be overturned by the people at the ballot box because of Voter Protection Act of 1998. So they voluntarily repealed 2305, and they came back in legislative session 2015 with the intent of passing legislation, each of those election laws again, and keeping them separate and apart. So they weren't turning all of your election law into one ship here. The liberal left could torpedo it, okay? Let me fast forward this a little bit. Let me add a show of hands. How many have seen this video prior to tonight? Prior to tonight, okay, fine. When this was captured, I presented it to the Maricopa County Executive Guidance Council, and they overwhelmingly instructed me to put this out on the web, out on YouTube. Watch this gentleman, what he's doing here. He's taken some of his ballots and he's put them up here in the ballot box here. He's fanning them out right here. He's going to take a picture. I don't know if it's proof of what he had been doing, or it eventually got posted on this organization's webpage. But watch what he does here, okay? Now, okay, he's going to take a picture. During that period of time, I recognized he had an open ballot, an unsealed ballot. And I mentioned that to him, and he took that ballot, and you'll see here in a few moments, he took that ballot and set it to the side, okay? So let's go fast forward here, since everybody, or most of you, have seen this. Let's go over to about here. Let's see. Still stuffing, still stuffing. Okay, here we go. I don't know if you can see this as well that way or this way, okay? I think this way is probably a little better. What he does, he takes that ballot and he puts it in that iPad that he was taking this picture with. He crouches down where I can't see him. He puts that ballot, that one right there, inside of his iPad, and then he puts his iPad, or whatever that is, into his box, and then he walks out. Okay, you can see it right there. There it is. Okay, now that's an unsealed ballot. Okay, it's a felony in the state of Arizona to tamper with ballots. So he takes the unsealed ballot out, and he comes back here in a few moments with that same ballot, or possibly that same ballot. I think it's the same ballot, and it's sealed, and he puts it into the box. Okay, all right. Should be coming back in. I think it's coming in right now. There he goes. There's the ballot. And he puts it in. he's watching people, and there he goes. All right, so that's the end of that. Let's see, I need my reading glasses. Okay, all right, let's bring up the presentation, and let's go back to the slideshow.
Should we put in presentation one step at a time?
Okay, so we put that out on YouTube just before the general election in 2014. It went viral. That YouTube video has now had some 550,000 views, okay? Most of them were during that period of time during the election cycle, during that 2014 period. Several hundred articles were written, tens of thousands of comments were made about it, and people around the country said, why in the world would anybody, why would you in Arizona allow that to happen? There's only 2 states that let that happen, okay? All the other 48 states do not allow ballot harvesting and stuffing, and definitely not tampering, okay? So this was an issue that I feel is extremely important. It's important tonight as much as it was back then, okay? Because it's still an issue. It's still an issue. During this legislative session, Senator Don Shooter out of LD 13, he's from Yuma, started with SB 1340. And 1340 was trying to rein in some of this ballot harvesting and stuffing that we saw here a few moments ago. It morphed or evolved into SB 1339, which actually had, it was called strike-off bill. And what they did is they had gutted one of the bills that they were doing during legislative session, actually put the same language that they passed in 13 into that bill. And unfortunately, this legislative session, we had some issues down there where they were working into the wee hours of the morning on the House side, which they worked till 3-something in the morning. But the Senate side, they closed for the session, or sine die as they call it, at about 1 a.m. on that same morning. So there were a lot of good bills, a lot of good legislation, a lot of potential law that fell to the floor, if you will, because they lost the momentum. I certainly hope that Senator Shooter brings that bill back this next legislative session before our primary and our general election in 2016. SB 1003, the 2013 version, was then LD 23 Senator Michelle Reagan's bill, and that's the one that I testified on. That's the one that got passed in the 2013 legislative session, and unfortunately was repealed in the 2014 session because of what I mentioned just a few moments ago. So today, ballot harvesting and stuffing are still legal in the state of Arizona, okay? Tampering is not. That's a felony. Okay, now that gentleman that came in had a shirt on, a t-shirt, okay? It said 500,000. Well, that was a logo for an organization called Citizens for a Better Arizona. It was started by this gentleman here on the left, Randy Carraz, and that gentleman on the right is Trumpka, who's the president of the AFL-CIO. Mr. Carraz was brought into Arizona to turn this state blue, okay, just like they did in Colorado. He's a progressive socialist. He's a union operative. He uses the Saul Alinsky tactics in getting what they want. They use the blueprint. How many of you know what the blueprint is? Okay, the blueprint is a book that was published on what happened in Colorado. Colorado, if you remember correctly, was a conservative state at one time. But they used the blueprint, which is in print. You can buy the book, and you can see what they did to Colorado. And as we all know, Colorado now, unfortunately, most overwhelming, the majority is liberal Democrat. They ballot harvest, stuff, and tamper. That's what you just saw in one of his operatives earlier in that video I showed you. That gentleman, who I had no idea who he was one of Mr. Carraz's operatives. They eliminated Russell Pierce in the recall here in LD 23 was it 5/25? Can't remember if that was before the redistricting or not. Some of you are aware of what happened there with regards to the fact that they ran another Republican against Russell Pierce, and they eliminated Russell. And then they eliminated conservatives throughout the state. And they are actually suing me and the Maricopa County Republican Committee. And why? Because we shed light on what they did during that 2014 election cycle. I am proud to say that Citizens for a Better Arizona in February of this year closed their doors. And do you know why? Because we shed the light on what they were doing with regards to this type of issue. All right? They closed the door. That's the good news. The bad news is now they're calling themselves Arizona Blue. And they're reinventing themselves. They've had to change their name because of what happened with all of that national publicity with regards to that YouTube video, the several hundred articles written, the tens of thousands of comments that were made. Okay? All right. Closed primaries. I see both of these issues during that two-year period of time I was your chairman. I witnessed these two issues and actually saw them come together as interrelated. Okay? And let me explain that. We have closed primaries here in Arizona because of what happened in 1998. In 1998, there were two propositions. One was an initiative. An initiative is brought by the people. Okay? And the liberals, actually it was Grant Woods and a lot of what we call, or I call rhinos, brought an initiative to the ballot, Prop 106, that was going to allow registered voters to vote in any primary. Okay? All registered voters could vote for anybody they wanted. Okay? All right? It would have had everybody on the ballot, and you could just vote across party lines. It's what I call a chaos primary. Okay? Chaos primary. California has, or did have, what they call a blanket primary. Okay? So at that time we had about 2.3 million voters in Arizona, but it didn't make the ballot. And why it didn't make the ballot was because the legislators came up with Prop 103, a referendum, which they thought at that time would be a compromise just to allow independent voters to come in to the primaries and then vote about, be it Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever. Semi-open primary, as we call it today, and is what it was called back then. Well, at the time, there were only 320,000 independent voters in the state of Arizona. 320,000 independent voters. It passed. It passed 489,000 to 428,000. Okay? And this is a lot of numbers, but the only numbers I want you to focus on are the total number of voters in 1998 were 2.3 million of a population of 4.8. We fast forward to January of 2015, and the total voters are 3.2 million with a total population of 6.4. This graph here is the one that really, people really are shocked when they see it. The gray bar is 1998. The black bar is 2015 January, and these numbers come from the Secretary of State's office. Okay? Look what happened here. There's where your growth happened, ladies and gentlemen. They overwhelmingly became the #1 block of voters in the state of Arizona. These two organizations didn't grow by much at all. Okay? This is serious, in my opinion. Now, when the Prop 103 passed, the Libertarian Party said no. We will not agree to that, and they sued the state of Arizona, and they won. Their primaries are closed. They can close their primaries at will. It only needs the executive committee of the Libertarian Party to say, yes, I want an open primary, or no, I don't want an open primary. Okay? That decision was appealed to Ninth Circuit, and they prevailed there also. And in that judge's opinion, both in the lower court, federal court down in Tucson, and the Ninth Circuit Court, the courts indicated that the other political parties could be able to do the same thing. Okay? And that's why I took on this issue concerning closed primaries. All right? At the time, now this is just a little bit of difference on the pie graph. At the time in 1998, independent voters were only 14% of the total voters. Fast forward to 2015, they're now 36%. Okay? And if you saw the numbers that came out from the Secretary of State's office just this April, just their last report, the Republican Party lost again. We lost registered voters again. Okay? Democrats lost some voters, but the independent voters gained, again, quite a few. They're continuing to grow as the two major political parties, Democrat and Republican, are losing registered voters. Okay? All right. So, during the 2014 election cycle, the primaries specifically, we had a lot of contested races, both in Maricopa County and around the state. Okay? I was getting phone calls, emails prior to the primary about issues that would be questionable, all right? And one of those was LD25 Senate primary. The conservatives over in LD25, which is the greater Mesa area, which is just your neighbor to the east, as you well know, found a good man in the name of Dr. Ralphie, very strong constitutional conservative, to run against Bob Worsley, who was the incumbent at that point in time. Okay? Worsley had demonstrated during his first 2 years that he was very liberal. Okay? He supported Obamacare Medicaid expansion, amnesty for illegal aliens, Common Core. There were, and if you notice on your ASRA handout that I have there on the chair, one of the things we do is score the legislators. Okay? And you'll notice that Mr. Worsley has gotten a very, very, very low score this second session. Okay? So what was happening here is Mr. Worsley was not getting the traction within the Republican voters that he did the first time. Okay? So he was having to go out and, believe it or not, Citizens for a Better Arizona, Randy Peraza's group, was helping him. Okay? They were taking Democrats and re-registering them independent, okay? Re-registering them independent so they could pull ballots in the primary to beat Dr. Heath. Now, Dr. Heath only lost by 1,646 votes, okay? All right? Here's the number of independents that voted in that Senate legislative district race. You think it makes the difference? Absolutely makes the difference. People say, well, how do you know how they vote? Well, first of all, independent voters vote liberal or moderate, okay? And when we had so many of the Democrats who registered independents and they could pull a ballot to vote for Worsley, I said, well, okay. So I requested to receive registration and re-registration activity, not for just LD25, but for every legislative district in Maricopa County for the past 4 years. Okay? Because I wanted to see what was going on. And when we got that data and we analyzed it, it was clear that these Democrats, unfortunately, are not stupid. They understand how to game the system. They re-register independent so they can vote to affect the outcome of our elections. And that's why I think it's extremely important that we close our primaries. Okay? That's the resolution that I wrote prior to the Maricopa County Republican Committee annual meeting in January of this year. Okay? What I had suggested in that resolution was either litigation, like the Libertarians who sued and won in federal court and upheld on appeal, and litigation costs are low, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, or a referendum, which would come out of our legislators and would be on the November 2016 ballot. Strong chance it would be defeated. And the reason being is because there's so many independents out there that would not want to see this happen, okay? The campaign costs would be high, and then again, the 1998 Voter Protection Act. And what that act is that if something gets to the ballot and the voters approve or disapprove it, approve it, it's onerous to get it changed or revised or repealed, okay? We have a lot of laws on the books in the state of Arizona that unfortunately are affected by the 1998 Voter Protection Act, okay? Which ties the hands of our legislators, okay? All right. So, at the MCRC, Maricopa County Republican Committee statutory meeting, it overwhelmingly passed by the precinct committeemen, 1225 to 596. I submitted that same resolution to the state GOP to have it considered at their meeting, and unfortunately ran into a roadblock. Obstructionism, to say the least. And I could not understand why. Okay? Submitted the resolution to the Resolutions Committee of the AZGOP, and if any of you were following all of that fiasco in the briefs and out on the blogs, there was a deliberate, concerted attempt to not let that resolution get to the floor of the state GOP meeting. So with all that said and done, our bylaws at the state level allow for resolutions to be introduced from the floor if you get 20% of the delegates to sign a petition for that. So we worked very hard that day. Excuse me, I'm getting hoarse. We got over 400 state committeemen to sign the petition to introduce that resolution from the floor at the state meeting. It passed overwhelmingly. The voice vote, for those of the state committeemen that were there at that meeting, I would say rattled the Grace Community Sanctuary Hall. Okay? As I was investigating all of this, and this was after actually what happened in January, I discovered an article that was done in August of 2014 where Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman, actually supports closing the primaries. Okay? And if you remember correctly, in Mississippi in August of 2014, John McCain went over to Mississippi and helped Thad Cochran beat Chris McDaniel, and the way they did it was they had Democrats vote for Thad Cochran. Okay? All right? So, the Republican leadership was very upset at what happened. A lot of the Republican leadership were very upset with what happened in Mississippi. And in that article, Priebus indicates he's a longtime supporter of closed primaries. And this is a direct quote from the article. This is a position I have held for a long time and is consistent with the party's platform. I repeat, consistent with the party platform, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Overwhelming majority of the 168 RNC members support closed primaries. Now, the 168 members, each state has 3 that are a part of that. That's the chairman and the 2 national committeemen, committeeman and committeewoman. And then you have your 18 executive officers. Okay? Overwhelming majority of them in their Chicago meeting said that they wanted primaries closed at the state level. Okay? I guess Mr. Graham didn't get the memo. So, what's happened, based upon my research, is that there are states at various phases of closing their primaries. Utah, Idaho, Montana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and the list is growing. This over here was a poll that was done in Alabama just after the fiasco that happened in Mississippi, and 77% of the Republican voters said, we want our primary closed. Okay? All right. So, on that note, I want to open it up for discussion because I know I was gone for 3 weeks on vacation during that period of time that Robert Graham had his AZGOP Executive Committee meeting on April the 18th. And for those of you here in this room that went down there to protest Mr. Graham's continued obstructionism and his heresy to the disrespect to the state precinct committeemen, I want to thank you. I would have been there with you. I would have been outside with you protesting and possibly gotten arrested, okay? Because I understand that Chairman Graham was going to arrest or threaten to have duly elected state and precinct committeemen arrested for expressing their First Amendment right. You know, what can I say? You be the judge with regards to what we have as chairman of the Republican Party right now. So I'd like to open it up to questions. I know I'm probably running over, but is any type of questions, Matt?
You got half an hour. I mean, we're good. You start at 7:30 and you're good to 8.
Well, I told you 30:30, and I appreciate that very much. So this is the part of the evening that I really enjoy. The commentary, the questions. I open it up to questions with regards to the issues that I just presented to you. Yes, sir.
The gentleman stuff in the ballots that you had on the YouTube video, what election, was that for a primary or for a general?
That was for the August 2014 primary. Okay? August 2014 primary. Okay? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Would you define forest harvesting stuffing?
Okay. Harvesting is the going out and going door to door and collecting ballots. What we've discovered, and what I firmly believe, honestly believe, is that the progressive socialists and the liberal left will go out and they will register people to vote. Okay, people, and this came out in the testimony in January of 2013 at the Senate hearing, okay? They will go out and identify individuals that might be eligible to vote. I repeat, might be eligible to vote. And they'll go to the door and aggressively try to sign them up to vote, okay? And sign them up with help. And they keep a database of those individuals, okay? And they know once the early ballots start coming out that they're going to go back to these people and collect those ballots. They'll either collect them for them, they'll either help them vote, okay? But they will persuade those people to try to give their ballot, as that person did with his 600 plus in that box that he brought in the day before the election, okay? All right. Stuffing is defined as putting them in the ballot box as he was doing, okay? Harvesting is collecting them. Stuffing is what he was doing.
One person putting in many.
Yeah, this country was based and built on a one person, one vote democracy, okay? Republic, rather, okay? With a Democrat vote. And unfortunately, these operatives, they do the one person, X number of votes, okay? Now, where were those votes? Okay, where were those ballots? The concern that I have that came out in that Senate hearing in January of 2013 is chain of custody, okay? Typically, if you're an early ballot voter, it gets mailed to your house. And Republicans are responsible enough that, you know, if we vote them and we go back out to our mailbox and we put them in the mailbox. Or you take them to the polling location the day of the election, be it primary or general, okay? But it isn't 1 in 100. You might be taking your family, or you might be taking your sons and daughters or something like that, but it's only a few, okay? It's only a few. There's no legitimate reason why that person should be taking 600 or so ballots to the ballot box on the day before the election. Now, that wasn't a polling location. That was the county election location down on, is it 3rd Avenue? I think it's 3rd Avenue. Yeah, 3rd Avenue. Where they actually have all of the early ballots where they process them, okay? And they're secured, all right? That wasn't a polling location the next day. That was the county elections main facility, okay? Do I answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And tampering is what he did there at the end, which is a class 6 felony, I think, 5 or 6. Yes, sir.
Did he get,
No, sir.
Under the...
He didn't get prosecuted. No.
Under the litigation that you're proposing, would there be any exemption for people to bring in multiple ballots, or would it always be strictly 1-to-1?
Okay, now, stay with me on that. The resolution that I authored and that was overwhelmingly passed at the county level, Maricopa, and at the state level, was to close the primaries okay?
Correct.
To close the primaries. That's not the other issue that we talked about on ballot harvesting, stuffing, and tampering. That would have to be litigation, I'm sorry, that would have to be a bill that turns into a law that would address that issue. The issue concerning litigation was to close the primary for the Republican Party here in Arizona, just like the Libertarian Party was successful in doing. And I talked with the Libertarians when I just got back, and they indicated to me that they're closing their primary this next election cycle. And they can do that, they can flip the switch on and off. Okay? All right. Any other question?
No.
Okay, yes, sir.
You mentioned with Prop 103 that established the semi-open primary, that it was a referendum. Wasn't it a constitutional amendment? I mean, that it amended the Arizona Constitution, so we'd have to do a constitutional amendment or a federal lawsuit saying that the Arizona Constitution violates our.
Right, and that's what I suggested in the resolution. There were two avenues. Referendum, which is what they did to create it in the first place, okay, to do a semi-open. Right. And that would go to the people, okay, on the November 2016 ballot. And the legislators still have the 2016 legislative session to consider that. Okay? And I do know that there are some activists, some very active conservatives who are going to lobby the conservative caucus this 2016 election cycle to do that, okay? And the other was the litigation, which the Libertarians were very successful in doing. And again, if you read the legal opinions, the court opinions, it absolutely gave us, the other parties, Democrat, Republican, or whomever else is recognized in the state of Arizona, the door, opened the door to file a lawsuit. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about what that cost would be, okay? And unfortunately, numbers were overinflated on those individuals who don't want to do the litigation, okay, to close the primaries, and understated on the other side. But, in my opinion, what's happened this last 30, 60 days is a full discussion, a full debate, and everything has been flushed out with regards to what would it really cost to do it, okay, versus all of that conjecture and hypothetical commentary and quotes that were being, okay. I have letters from two attorneys right here. Right here. Who actually just, how would I say? They totally go against what Robert Grant has said at his meeting on the 18th, okay? Here are the two letters, okay? I haven't had a chance to talk to David Hardy, who was the legal counsel for the Libertarian Party, who was successful both at the Pima County Federal Court level and at the Ninth Circuit Court level. But I did talk to him when I started this whole thing, and if you saw my email that I sent out, I encouraged all of you that saw that email, that it went to the ex-com members, to contact Mr. Hardy, to contact Joe Canfield, to contact Corey Langhoffer, okay? Because I wanted it out there in open discussion dialogue with regards to, you know, unfettered open debate, okay? Honest open debate, okay? So right now, as I understand it, what happened at the state committee meeting on the 18th disappointed a great deal of people with regards to how it was handled, and then the threat of arresting duly elected state and precinct committee. I think, I know of one person, there's others probably, I know there's several here in this room right here that were down there that morning. So they have firsthand knowledge and firsthand accountability or accounting of what happened that morning. All right. But I do think it's shameful. I think it's unacceptable for a person like the chairman of the Republican Party to act like he did during that meeting. I've had discussions, even though I was on vacation, I did have some discussions with individuals that were there long telephone conversations about how embarrassing and how ridiculous that meeting was held and the disdain for the elected precinct committee and the state committee. So hopefully, just because that happened doesn't mean that we're through. And I can't go any further with it at this point in time. I'm not going to take no for an answer because I think closing our primaries is extremely important. Another aspect of closing our primaries, look, there's candidates in this room that have gone out there and have fought the hard fight, okay? I know Mr. Hallman did a statewide race, okay? I can't even fathom the gruel, the effort that it takes to do a statewide race, okay? But the way it is today, in our primaries, he had to, reach out to Republicans, because it was a Republican primary, right? But I bet he had to reach out to independents, too, to try to get their vote to help put him over the top, okay? My opinion is that if we did close our primaries, that the campaign cost to people that have entered into that primary race or run for office, be it at the legislative district level or at the state level, okay, would be a lot less money. Because you wouldn't have all of those other people that you have to try to bring on board or convince. Yes, ma'am?
Isn't there another piece to the puzzle where it makes it so they can manipulate with these independent voters? Is that the Democrats run unopposed in their primaries?
Historically, Democrats, for the most part, will clear the bench, as I call it, and run, for the most part, unopposed. I think there was a situation this last primary that was a little different in one primary race, and that was CD7, where with Mr. Pastor retiring, it brought out a lot of Democrats who were wanting that congressional seat in CD7. So that was something unusual from what I've seen. They typically do not run what I call more the merrier, like we do. We do more the merrier, okay? I mean, look at the presidential candidates that we had again this time, more the merrier, okay? How many gubernatorial candidates do we have this time in Arizona? We had, I think we started with like 10 or 12, and it got down to like 7 or 8, more the merrier, okay? So yeah, the Democrats typically will, for some reason, somehow, they'll identify who they want to run, okay? Yes, sir?
2 questions, Chairman.
Okay.
First, in order to file a lawsuit, we have to have standing. Can we show that we have standing, and how so? And then second, if I recall, at the state executive meeting, a number of $10 million was put forth as to being the cost. Have you seen or have any knowledge of an itemized account of that $10 million?
And again, I wasn't at that meeting, but I do understand that there were some letters that were written by some of these attorneys, and maybe some other attorneys, like what I have in my brief, who indicated that the cost range anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 is what I've heard, okay? Letters from these attorneys. Not millions, not hundreds of thousands, okay? To do something like the litigation, all right? When I spoke with David Hardy, the legal counsel for the successful legal counsel for the Libertarian Party, he indicated a few $1,000s is all it would take, and he's the attorney who successfully did it for the Libertarian Party. And his comment was, the legal precedent has been set, okay? The legal precedent has been set. Now, the fact that there's more Republicans than Libertarians, the way that it would be addressed, or the strategy on that, was at the legislative district level because of what you just saw in LD 25. Okay, there is an adverse effect by the Libertarian, by the Independents and the Democrats who re-registered independent in that race. Okay, all right. So that's where you would look at where the harmed party is. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Unfortunately, we don't have the political will at the state level, and you asked who has the legal standing. Unfortunately, only the party. Okay? The party has the legal standing to file the lawsuit. Not a Republican voter, not that I'm aware of, but from what I understand in the legal opinions, it's the recognized legal party, like what the Libertarians do. Okay? It was executive officers of the Libertarian Party with the vote of the Libertarian voters, okay, in their convention or delegate or whatever they have, to go forward with that. So, unfortunately, yes, Mr. Holman.
Had you looked at the prior litigation that the Republican Party, the Democratic Party engaged in against the Libertarians regarding what those precedents meant and how they got established recently by the Libertarian Party?
Vaguely, I don't know, and I don't remember right off my head. I do know that the courts, the judges, the courts ruled that the Libertarians or the primary, the semi-open primary, that precinct commitment would not be, independent voters would not be allowed to pull ballots that had precinct commitment in contested precincts with that respect. The other issues that you're talking about, I can't answer at this point. I have not looked at that, no.
The proceedings for the cases are that the Libertarians fund their own primary, and that's part of the basis on which the Libertarian Party can have a closed primary. And I think there's debate among folks at the state party level that for the Republican Party to have a closed primary would, based on the prior case that was among the Democrats, the Republicans, and Libertarians in the state done in 1998, that the primary would then have to be funded by the party to be closed. That the party can have its own primary process, be it a convention or a primary by ballot, but in either instance it would have to be fully funded by the party.
Okay. I'd have to research the issue. When I talked with Mr. Hess, who's the perennial gubernatorial candidate for the Libertarians, I'm sure most of you know who Barry Hess is. I can't answer that one way or the other. I don't think they pay for their primaries today. Now, in 2000, they had a closed primary. Okay, in 2000 they had their closed primary. In 2000, for two cycles running, they had closed primary. And then the presidential candidate, Gary Johnson out of New Mexico, during that presidential cycle, he opened it.
It's when John Buttrick, as a gubernatorial candidate, won enough votes that the Libertarian Party first became a ballot recognized party.
Okay.
And that's when they had the opportunity to get candidates on the ballot through a petition process.
Okay.
But they had otherwise used for their primaries
A caucus system?
caucuses.
Right.
And the convention.
Okay. And that's another issue that's been discussed is, okay, if you can't close the primary to the voters, why not create a caucus system? Thank you, Mr. Hall, I appreciate that, Mr. Because there's so many different aspects and facets of this, believe me. There's been discussion about a caucus, that the Republican Party go to a caucus system. And who would be in that caucus? Well, there's discussion that precinct committeemen would be the delegates to a caucus for the Republican Party. We all know that the states around the country have different types of caucus. And caucus means different things to different people. When you say caucus, believe me, in the research that I've done, when you say caucus and you go to these different states that have caucuses, they're completely different, all of them. There's no one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter on the caucuses, okay? They do them differently. Utah has caucus, Virginia has caucus, Iowa has caucus, as we well know. There's New England states that have caucus, okay?
The advantage to a caucus is it's much easier to control the outcome, isn't it?
Well, easier to control the outcome, that's a true statement, and would you alienate, would you alienate your general voter registration population if they were Republican, and you go into a caucus system, and like you say, an oligarchy or just these precinct committeemen, if that's the way you structured it, would be. I know one thing, if you went to a caucus system here in Arizona, the Republican Party, the precinct committee were the delegates, precinct committeemen, real estate would go up astronomical. Believe me. You would be fighting, you would have contested precincts. Every precinct would be contested because people would want to be the delegate from that precinct to be at that caucus to vote for your elected, your candidates, okay? So, there's a lot of discussion going on. Do I have the answers? No? Yes, ma'am.
I would hope that we would have an opportunity to hear from Helen Purcell on the matter of advantage, disadvantage to the Republicans in the state of Arizona regarding open primaries versus what we have now, or the open primaries, closed primaries. She gave a lecture recently that I attended, and she actually reported on the numbers that are generated out of her office and the cost of that, and it was in the millions. You addressed litigation, I think, but her numbers were generated on the cost of what it would take to change that. And she also had statistics based on voting patterns and things like that. And she's been in that office for a long, long time, and I don't think anybody really knows that better than Helen herself. I hope that maybe we would invite her and have her give us some information regarding that. I think it would be helpful.
That's up to your legislative district, okay? But I will say one thing with regard to Helen Purcell. In the primary, there were only 89,000 89,000 independents that voted statewide, which was about 17% of the registered independent voter. And Secretary of State Ken Bennett, Helen Purcell, that's part of their mandate mission, is to encourage people to get out and vote, okay? That's part of what they're responsible for. They don't want to suppress people from voting. That's not what they're elected to do, okay? And then make it fair for everyone to vote in those elections if they're eligible to vote in. But that 89,000, and that was the other part that I didn't mention earlier, if you break it down by legislative district, like I did with LD 25, then it has a pattern. It absolutely has a pattern. And I can tell you various legislative districts where it was contested, a more moderate against a conservative, like in LD 15 with Heather Carter, LD 18 with Jeff Dial and Rob Rosen, and LD 16 with Doug Coleman, and LD 25 with Bob Wurzman. It definitely had made a difference. It was interesting that the number of independents that voted in the primary were much more and extremely higher where we had those contested primary races for the Republican Party. But with regards to Helen, that's great. I think we need to have an open, honest discussion and debate about what's going on, okay? But with no disrespect, I don't think she is the end-all authority on what the people, we the people, want with regards to how we handle our elections in the state of Arizona or in Maricopa County. She's an elected official, and she's supposed to be handling the elections as we the people want them to be handled, or as the law states, okay? But yes, she has lots of years' experience, and I have the utmost respect for her and Karen Osborne and all of the people that I had the pleasure of working with in the 2014 election cycle. Any other questions, any other comments? I've enjoyed it. Yes, sir.
AJ, just a question. We're sitting here taking the high ground, and those contemptible Democrats are doing this underhanded stuff. Is the Republican Party so contemptibly stupid they wouldn't do the same thing?
It's not my experience or my witness that we engage in this type of activity.
We have integrity.
Now we have losers.
We have ethics, we have integrity, We do one ballot, one vote. Yes, sir.
There's a practical reason it doesn't get done. there are working troops that collect ballots fairly effectively for the Democratic Party that are generally in line with them in ballot harvesting. So before the 14 cycle that Mr. Alfaro was showing the video from, we had a 2012 election in the city of Tempe for the mayor, for example. And the firefighters, with the help from the Democratic Party, went out wearing their "I am lovely firefighter" shirts, knock on doors, and they are more trusted than the typical person going door to door. And they collected approximately 1,600 ballots in that election and delivered them in the 5 closing days of the election. Mayor Mitchell won by 135 votes. The more pernicious part of this ballot harvesting that Mr. Alfaro hasn't described, that I think is more worrisome than watching all the ballots get deposited, are the ballots that don't get deposited. Because if your friendly firefighter is standing there saying, gee, you're in a double D Democrat household, I'm knocking on your door, you haven't mailed in your early voting ballots, I'd love to take them in for you. Oh, you haven't filled them out, let me help you. Oh, I'm sorry, you marked for Mr. Monty here. I don't think you meant to do that. That one goes in the garbage can. So it's the ballots that don't make it in that are more concerning to me than the ones that do. Certainly Republicans could go out and collect ballots, but it's harder unless you have a status with the voter. And besides police union members and firefighters, it's hard to find people with that level of status who can so quickly and easily collect ballots. The other instance in which that's occurred and it impacted the CD1 race was on the Navajo reservation, where Patrick held parties, and vote by mail ballots were brought to those parties and filled out and filed. And if you look at the numbers of vote by mail ballots delivered in that set of the primaries, it's overwhelming the number, and it's the margin of victory. So.
And Mr. Holland hit on 2 extremely important issues and aspects of this whole thing because of the fact of chain of custody, okay? The chain of custody. That was an excellent example, extremely interesting to me, of what happened in 2012 in the city of Tempe, where I live in South Tempe, okay? But it's the unions, it's the progressive socialists, it's those organizations that organize and actually get paid to do this. You've got union firefighters who get release time. You get organizations like Citizens for Better Arizona who pay their operatives to go out. You have SCIU, you have AFL-CIO. They all get paid to go do this, ladies and gentlemen, okay? They get paid to do it. And that's why we have so much ballot harvesting on the Democrat or the Liberal Democrat Progressive Socialist side. Yes, it's right there.
I was just going to say in response to that, and yours, they have all those organizations, but we have one that they don't have. We have church. And I've done, voter drives and things at churches, and I think that can also be extremely effective. That's something that we should take advantage of. I haven't seen much of it yet, but I think that can be very helpful on our side, something that the Democrats don't have.
I truly enjoyed it. If there's no other comments or questions, I will turn the meeting back over to Chairman Jones and Matt Backey. And thank you very much for having me here this evening. Okay? For those of you that have an open schedule on May the 30th, we have Sharon Angle, who is the president of the National Federation of Republican Assemblies, here in town, speaking to the Arizona Republican Assembly group on Saturday. And those pamphlets that I handed out, there's a website, and all of the information about that presentation is there and requires an Eventbrite ticket. It's free, but it requires an Eventbrite ticket to RSVP. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.